Hello, we are here for the final remaining part of the draw. So this will be the even numbered groups and the even numbered seeds. To disclose how this will take place, we have written a document explaining how this will work, which will be posted after we have done the draw. So as followed, this is how it will conclude. In total, there are 16 groups which will take place in the afternoon, because there's 32 groups in total. 16 in the morning, 16 in the afternoon. After the odd group draw, which took place yesterday, Group 3, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23, 25, 27 and 29 are all afternoon groups. So this leaves 7 groups for the afternoon. Today's draw will be done as followed to compensate for those who need to be in an afternoon session. Just to note that groups 6, 8, 20, 22 and 24 will only have 8 players in. So for now, every single group that we draw, we will draw 7 players. If a group draws a person who requires an afternoon session, that group will then be allocated as an afternoon group. As there's only 7 groups remaining to be in the afternoon, once those are filled, we will then do the following. If we draw someone who requires an afternoon group, once all the groups have been allocated, they will then be placed in the first available afternoon group until that group has reached the total amount of players. For example, if Group 2 is drawn as an afternoon session and has 7 players, the first person who requires an afternoon place will be put as the 8th player in that group. The second person who requires an afternoon place will be put as the 8th player in the next available afternoon group. For example, Group 4, if that's drawn as an afternoon group. If the group's already been assigned as an 8-people group, so that's 6, 8, all the rest of them, only 1 afternoon player will be placed in that group to retain the 8-people group, and that group will then be concluded and closed. Once all the people who require an afternoon session have been drawn, and all the groups have been drawn as 7 players, we will then distribute the remaining players into the remaining places in each group once the total of groups have been picked, thereby making all groups 9 or 8 players. Like I said, that will be posted after we have done the draw. And if you have any questions, please just wait until that document's been uploaded so you know exactly what's happened. I will be saying throughout the draw what's happening, just in case people start watching, but I hope you understand. So to conclude with the draw, fantastic. This is Chris, he's been our adjudicator again. And he's writing down everything if technology fails us. So, to start the draw, we have the remaining balls. In Group 2, our seed is Daniel Adams from Newcastle. To go with them, we have number 56.
That is Tom Hill from Unknown University.
Tom Hill from Unknown University. This is a group of 9 players, by the way. (43).
That is Richard Floyd from Lancaster.
Spot. Number 269.
That is Mohammed Abdul Ghani from Unknown University as well.
The 5th person in this group will be number 250.
That is Casey Diamond from Lancaster.
The 6th person in this group will be 2, 6, 3.
That is Joshua Graham from Exeter.
And the 7th person in this group will be 1, 2, 6.
That is Chris Walton from Newcastle.
That group requires someone with an afternoon session, so now we'll take one of the places for the afternoon groups. So group 2 is now an afternoon group, just to verify. As we've only drawn 7 people, anybody who requires an afternoon group will be drawn into that group from here on out until we next achieve an afternoon group. So group 4, our seed is Jack Almond from Newcastle. To follow them will be 1, 4, 2. 2, 4, 2. Not 1, 4, 2.
That is Fred Evans from York.
To follow them will be 45.
That is Scott England from Oxford.
One, 9, 3.
That is Ben Ellicott from Nottingham Trent.
The 5th person in that group will be 2, 7, 2.
That is Jacob Simpson from Loughborough.
The 6th person in that group will be 96.
That is Harry Lancaster from Lancaster.
Wait, sorry. And the 7th person in that group will be 1, 1, 4.
As Jessica Phoenix from Lancaster.
Sorry. As someone in that group requires an afternoon session, group 4 has now been allocated as an afternoon group. We now have 5 places left for afternoon groups. So, moving on to group 6. Our seed is Adam Warner from Sheffield, and following them will be 1, 7, 2.
As James Little from Lancaster.
Please bear in mind this is a group of 8 people as well. The 3rd person in that group will be 2, 7, 4.
That is Adam Lofthouse from Loughborough.
The next person in this group will be 1, 1, 5.
That is Ben Haynes from Coventry.
The 5th person in this group will be 1, 2, 8.
That is Ryan Pass from Loughborough.
The 6th person in this group will be 2, 4, 0.
That is Daniel Pallant from Exeter.
And finally, the 7th person in this group will be 1, 7, 5.
That is George Hilditch from York.
As someone in that group requires an afternoon session, group 6 is now drawn as an afternoon group. Therefore, there are only 4 remaining group places left to take place in the afternoon. If those of you have just joined in, we are doing the draw by drawing 7 people at once to take into account those who need an afternoon session. Once we've filled all the afternoon slots, we'll then be placing people in afternoon groups. This has been explained at the very beginning of the video and will also be explained by a document after we have concluded the draw. So moving on to group 8, which is also a group of 8 people. Our seed is Michael Gladstone from Lancaster. Gladstone, should I say? Not Stone. From Lancaster. And following them will be number 97.
That is Jack Boucher from Lancaster.
(219).
That is David Badham from Exeter.
The fourth person is 63.
That is Kyle Jex from Lancaster.
The fifth person is 265.
That is Amber Hayes from Lancaster.
This is not a Lancaster heavy group. Number 6 in this group will be 170.
The big fish. It's Kieran Fitzgibbon from Sheffield Hallam.
And the 7th person in this group will be 186.
That is Matt Simcock from Lancaster.
As someone requires an afternoon session in this group, Group 8 has now been allocated as an afternoon group, leaving 3 groups remaining to be afternoon groups. Taking a sip of my coffee. We're now moving on to Group 10. Group 10 seed is Peter Gyves from Manchester. So following them will be number 36.
That is Joshua Weston from Exeter.
Number 48.
That is James McLaughlin from Lancaster.
The 4th person in this group will be number 112.
That is Jesse Sale from an unknown university.
The 5th person will be (87).
That is Christian, I apologise for mispronouncing this, Tresbinski from Coventry.
Oh, it's a 6 now. The 6th person in this group will be 38.
That is Ryan O'Connor from Nottingham Trent.
And finally, the 7th person in this group will be 76.
That is Teague Brennan from Loughborough.
Tie. As someone in that group requires an afternoon session, Group 10 has now also been allocated as an afternoon group, thereby leaving 2 groups remaining to be afternoon sessions. Don't worry, I've got it sorted. Our next group will be a group of 9. It's Group 12. Our seed for Group 12 is Josh Habgood from York. Following them will be number 42.
That is Ben Charnock from Lancaster.
With them will be number 150.
That is Nathan Cooper from Lancaster.
Next will be 157.
That is Curtis Thorpe from Sheffield Hallam.
The fifth person in this group will be 209.
There's David Reed from York.
The sixth person in this group will be 198.
That is Matthew Saley from UCFB Wembley.
And the seventh person in this group will be 129.
That is Ed Dando from Newcastle.
As someone in this group requires an afternoon session, Group 12 has now been allocated as an afternoon group. Just to let you know that our 30th seed also requires an afternoon group, thereby making Group 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 and 30 as afternoon groups. So from here on out, if anybody requires an afternoon session, they will be distributed into those groups, taking up the 2 remaining places that we haven't drawn yet. So the first person drawn will go into Group 2, the second person drawn will go into Group 4, and third, sixth, until the group is full and concluded. Yes? So now to continue the draw, Group 14. Our seed is Matt Sharp from York, and to follow them will be number 61.
There's Luke Whitaker from Newcastle.
Next person will follow. That's 80.
There's Luke Almond from Durham.
The fourth person will be 192.
There's Jack Lewis from Sheffield.
The fifth person will be 133.
There's Esme Nichols from York.
The sixth person will be 34.
That is Daniel Thiemann from Exeter.
As Daniel Thiemann requires an afternoon session, they will now be moved to Group 2 to take up a afternoon group slot, thereby making Group 2 a group of 8 currently, and we still require 2 to be drawn for Group 14. So the sixth person again for Group 14 will be 254.
There's Jack Eastham from Lancaster.
And the seventh person for Group 14 will be 105.
That is Jabbe Kerris from Exeter.
As they require an afternoon group, we are now moving them to Group 4 to take up one of the afternoon places, and we will now draw the actual 105, the actual seventh person for Group 14, which will be 142.
There's Sean Early from Lancaster.
So now 7 people have been drawn for Group 14, 2 required at morning groups moving to 2 and 4. We are now moving to Group 16 to draw the 7 people for that group. Our 16th seed is Chris Conn from Lancaster, and to follow them will be 216.
That is Patch Heisman from Lancaster.
Thank God he drew a morning session. The next person in that group will be 2, 4, 6.
There's Elliot Taylor from Loughborough.
The fourth person in that group will be 1, 7, 4.
There's Benjamin Lawrence from Sheffield Hallam.
The fifth person in that group will be 140.
There's Henry Williams from Oxford.
The sixth person in that group will be 165.
That is Harry Willoughby from Unknown University.
And finally, the seventh person will be 255.
And that is Jamie Lee from Lancaster.
I just threw the ball at him. It's you! And that concludes the first 8. I'm going to take a swig of drink. First 8 groups of the even groups. Next, we will be drawing group 18. Our seed is Andy Kent from Loughborough. And to follow Andy will be 1, 3, 4.
That is Harry Clayton from Durham.
Following them will be 1, 4, 7.
That is Mark Dickinson from Newcastle.
Ooh. Next in that group will be 171.
That is Hannah Whiteley from Lancaster.
The fifth person in that group will be 155.
That is Ben Clubley from UCFB Wembley.
The sixth person in that group will be 258.
That is Matthew Child from Hull.
And finally, the seventh person in that group will be 141.
That is Samantha
Jen. Oh, she told me this the other day.
from Lancaster.
Sam, it's you. I'm so sorry. I forgot how to say it again. Right. So now moving on to Group 20. Group 20 is a group of 8 people. And our seed is Neil Wilson from Liverpool John Moores. And to follow them will be... I'm still trying to remember it. I can't remember. 146.
There's Amy Royal from Lancaster.
Following them will be 184.
There's James Dobbing from University of Nottingham.
The fourth person in that group will be 213.
There's Chris Allen from Lancaster.
The fifth person will be, am I right? 70.
That's Henry Wild from Lancaster.
The sixth person will be 271.
There's Dan Mills from Nottingham Trent.
And the seventh person in this group will be 235.
There's Thomas Beniston from Nottingham Trent also.
Okay, so group 22 now. Our seed is Alistair Morrison from Lancaster. And to follow them will be 227.
Peter Smith from Lancaster.
along with 89.
Eleanor Bradshaw from Manchester.
Along with 2, 3, 4.
Just Harry Owens from Etihad.
The fifth person in that group will be 164.
That is Stephanie Labber from Lancaster.
The sixth person in that group will be 152.
It's Harry Cowland from Lancaster.
And the seventh person will be 194.
That is Lewis Hines from York.
Fantastic. The next group will be Group 24. Group 24 is also a group of 8 people. Our seed is George McDermott from Lancaster. And to follow them will be 173.
It's Katie Thomas from Lancaster. She'll love that.
Should be buzzing. Following them will be 205.
That's Thomas Lloyd from Loughborough.
The fourth person will be 188.
There's Tony Hadlow from the University of Nottingham.
Toby. Hadlow, not Tony. The fifth person will be 230.
There's Emily Delaney from Lancaster.
The sixth person will be... I don't want to be in this group. 277.
That is Stephen Godfrey from Sheffield.
And the final person in this group will be, for now, anyway, 268.
That is Michael Kelly from York.
Wunderbar. So now moving on to... Actually, for those of you who've just started watching, for example, Gobby, we're doing the draw of 7 people, and until we've allocated all the spots for the afternoon groups. As we've now allocated all the spots for the afternoon groups, if anybody is drawn who requires an afternoon group, they will take the places that remain in those groups. So we've had 2 people drawn so far who required an afternoon group. So the first person was drawn into group 2, that now is 8 people. The second person was drawn into group 4, that now is 8 people, but they still groups of 9. So we've still got a few more people to draw out yet. So we have got a post about how we've done this. Well, we explained at the very beginning of the video and how we're doing this, and we will be posting a document explaining how we do this after we've done the draw, just so then it's a lot of verification for people who just have no idea what we're doing. So moving on to group 26, our seed is Adam Smith from Nottingham, and to follow them will be 94.
Is Callum Cornish from Coventry.
Third person in that group will be 44.
That is Samuel Lay from Lancaster.
The fourth person in that group will be number 39.
That is Sam Draper from Unknown University.
The fifth person in that group will be 62.
That is Turo Holder from UCFB Wembley.
As they require an afternoon group, they will be moved to Group 6, where they'll take the final place of that group, as number 6 requires 8. So now number 6 is closed and will not require any more teams in there. So, as I best can explain it. So we will now be drawing the 5th place for Group 26, which will be number 95.
There's Edward Wright from Hull.
The 6th place for this group will be 267.
That is Hamish Goodman from Loughborough.
And finally, the 7th place for now will be number 93.
That is Bill Calvert from Coventry.
So just to explain, as one person required in afternoon group, they have now been moved to Group 6, which will close and conclude that group, as they are a group of 8 people. And now we're moving on to Group 28. So Group 28, our seed is Daniel Bruh. Is it Bruh or Bruh? Bruh?
Bruh.
From Loughborough. So to follow them will be number 73.
That is Declan Parsons from Sheffield Hallam.
Along with them, number 46.
That is Thomas Hogg from Sheffield.
To follow them will be 197.
That is Daniel Davies from UCFB Wembley.
The 5th person in this group will be number 139.
That is Lawrence Cook from Lancaster.
The 6th person in this group will be 88.
That is Jack Alsop from York.
And finally, for now, the 7th person in this group will be 83.
That is Alex Roberts from Lancaster.
As they require an afternoon group, they will now be moved to Group 8, which is also a group of 8 people. So now that means that Group 8 is final and closed. And to replace them in that group will be number 55.
That is Niall Cameron from Leeds.
So now Cameron is in Group 28. As we explained earlier, before we move on to this next group seed requires an afternoon session. So anybody who's in an afternoon will stay in this group.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody is drawn in this group who requires an afternoon group, will remain in this group rather than being moved. So the draw of the 7 people will be as followed for these, even if they require an afternoon group or not, as this is already allocated as an afternoon group. So our seed is Bradley Bayliss from Manchester, and to follow them will be number 79.
There's Alex Downing from Sheffield Hallam.
The 3rd person in this group will be 226.
That is Lewis Fisher from Exeter.
Or Luke Fisher. You registered as Luke, but your captain called you Lewis, so we don't know who you are. The 4th person in this group will be 90.
There's Joe Portway from Durham.
The 5th person in this group will be 78.
That is Jacob Staniforth from Nottingham Trent.
The 6th person in this group will be 138.
That is Jack Holt, also from Nottingham Trent.
And the 7th person for this group will be 182.
That is Dylan Curitan from Liverpool John Moores.
As stated, as that group was already allocated as an afternoon group, those who were drawn who required an afternoon group will remain in that group. And now we're moving on to group 32. Our seed is Danny Hall from Sheffield. And to follow Danny Hall will be number 98.
There's Rachel Taylor from Lancaster.
Following them will be 162.
There's Daniel Clark from Loughborough.
Following them 58. Oh no, 57.
That is Jonathan Brand from Exeter.
As they require an afternoon session, they will be moved to group 10 to fill one of the spots there. There are still 1 spot remaining in group 10 as it is a group of 9. So to compensate for them, the 4th person coming out of group 32 will be 151.
That is Michael Britland from York.
The 5th person will be 204.
That is Tom Savage from Manchester.
The 6th person will be 206.
That is Thomas McConnell from York.
And the 7th person will be 131.
That is Alex Bateman from Exeter.
As Alex requires an afternoon group, we are now moving them to group 12 to fill one of the remaining spaces in group 12, as that has already been allocated as an afternoon group. So to take their place in group 32, the 7th person will be 51.
As Jordan Ambrose from Hull.
Okay. Do we have any more afternoon people, realistically? We now have remaining people, and we're going to now fill them into the spots which are remaining of the groups. So just to let people know, at the start of this, we declared that was only drawing 7 people per group to take into account those who require an afternoon group. Once we filled all the afternoon slots, as there's only 7 of them, anybody who required an afternoon group would take up one of the places, the remaining places in each group. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 and 30 were allocated as afternoon groups. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 and 12 all have been allocated a person who requires an afternoon session. So now we've got people remaining. They will be distributed from group 2 downwards. So group 2 still requires 1 more person. So group 2 will, the remaining person for group 2 will be number 247.
That is Rob Pierce from Loughborough.
That group now has 9 people in it, so that group is drawn and closed. So moving to group 4, the remaining person in that will be 187.
That is Nick Hood from Leeds.
So that group has now got 9 people in it. That group is drawn and closed. Group 6 already has 8 people in it and is an 8-person group. Group 8 has already got 8 people in it and is an 8-person group. And now moving on to group 10. So the remaining person for group 10 will be number 65.
That is Kim Hudspeth from Lancaster.
And that is now, that's group 10. So that's now got 9 people in it, so that group is now drawn and closed. Moving on to group 12. Do you understand what we're doing? Do we have any more afternoon people? How many? Should we leave 12 then? Or just...
No, because 30's got 2 spaces.
Alright, cool. So the next person going into group 12 is 176.
That is Bradley Hambleton from Sheffield Hallam.
Group 12 now has 9 people in it, so it's now drawn and closed. So moving on to group 14, which currently has 7 people in it. So we'll be drawing one person from this to this group, and then moving on to group 16, and then going back around. Yeah? Okay, so the one person next in this group for group 14 will be 53.
There's Scott Henderson of UCFB Wembley.
So that now has 8 people in it. It still requires one more, but we're moving to group 16. So the next person for group 16 will be 264.
That is Malcolm Glennie from Oxford.
That's now got 8 people in it, but it still requires one more. But we'll move to group 18, which is 124.
There's George Hardy from Lancaster.
That has 8 people in it now, but we'll move to group 20, which is 104.
There's Bethany Madden from the Unknown University.
Was that 20? That group now has 8 people in it, and it is a group of 8, so that is drawn and closed, so 20 is full. Group 22 will be 199.
There's David Fincham from York.
That group is also a group of 8 people, and 8 people have now been drawn, so that group is drawn and closed. Now moving to group 24. That's 110.
There's George Mitchell from Coventry.
That group is also a group of 8 people, and now 8 people have taken those places, though that group is now drawn and closed. Moving to group 26. It's 261.
There's Robert Gladman from Nottingham Trent.
Moving on to group 28 will be 220.
There's Jack Eastman from Exeter.
As Jack Eastman requires an afternoon group, we won't be placing them in group 28. We'll be placing them into group 30, which has a remaining afternoon place. So there, we will now draw the 8th person in group 28, which will be 243. It's me.
There's Hannah Metcalfe from Lancaster.
It's me. I thought I was going to be the last one out. So, should we skip 30?
Yeah.
So, should I just read that out now? Should I draw it first, or should we just leave 30? There's only one person who requires an afternoon place, and there's only one place left in the afternoon group, and that is
Gianni Forcellati. from Nottingham.
who's number 236. So if they're drawn, they'll be automatically placed into group 30, making group 30 drawn and closed. We just want to make sure that we're not drawing that for that. So into group 32 is 102.
That is Harry Keane from Lancaster.
Now, as 8 people have now been drawn into the remaining groups, we'll be drawing the final people for group 14, 16, 18, 26, 28 and 32. So we should only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people left remaining. Right, so drawing the final 6. So group 14, to conclude that group, will be 249.
That is Conal Doughty from Sheffield.
They conclude group 14. Now for group 16, the final person in that group will be 161.
That is Connor Ellis from York.
That concludes group 16. Group 18 will be 182.
That is Matthew Eardley from Sheffield.
That concludes group 18, which now has 9 players in it. Group 26 will be 225.
And that's Alistair Knox from Lancaster.
So that's 26. Will we be right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that concludes group 26. Now on to group 28. 210.
That is Dan Burnett from Durham.
Group 28. That is now final for group 28. And group 32. 236 is. Yeah, so that's already been drawn. That was, sorry, we just drew Gianni Fortulati, and we've already drawn them to group 30. So the final person drawn is 113.
And that is Jonathan Scragg from Lancaster.
Sorry if you was watching the entire thing, Jonathan, but you're out now. So that concludes all of the draw for Target UDUK Big Weekender 2018 singles. Like I say, if you had no idea what we was doing, we will be posting just after this what just happened, and then we will be posting all the groups which have been allocated, and if they're in the morning or if they're in the afternoon. So please don't panic if you don't know what group you're in, or please don't panic if you don't know if you're in the morning or afternoon. So thank you very much for watching. We're sorry for being a pain and making silly faces, but it's been great. So thanks a lot. Bye.